But I want to introduce a guest speaker that's going to be coming in here tonight. And he works with me quite a bit at Applied Behavior Research. His name is Russ Robson, and he did 19 years in the music industry. And he has some cool stuff I'll tell you about in a second, but this I think is actually pretty damn cool. He was a bluegrass drummer, and he opened for a country music group called Lady Antebellum. He was a club DJ for a while, worked with like LL Cool J, all kinds of cool stuff like that. But the cool thing, and the reason he's here tonight, is he did 12 years, and he's still active in the U.S. Army and the Special Operations Group. He's deployed to Afghanistan and Bogota, Colombia, and he's the first and only U.S. military dude to go through and graduate from Colombia, the country's PSYOPs, Psychological Operations Program. And he's worked with counter-drug special task forces, where his operations were seizure of all kinds of drugs and guns in South America. But he's run psychological operations, and he's done psychological warfare stuff most of his career. And he's the creator of this program called Unconventional Influence and the Narrative Fusion Cell, which I think he's going to talk about tonight. I told him to talk about whatever he thinks you would find most valuable tonight. So this is kind of a military special ops leadership development and campaign planning, using how a person plans a PSYOPs, a special warfare, a psychological warfare campaign, and kind of bringing that into normal everyday life. So he's one of my very good friends. He's a business friend of mine. He works with Applied Behavior Research quite a bit. And what you're going to hear tonight, if you have a second, now is the time to grab a pen and a paper if you have a second, because you're definitely going to want to take notes. This is going to be absolute gold, what you're about to get here tonight. So without further ado, I think Russ is here with us in the chat. So Russ, welcome. Everybody give Russ a big thumbs up or whatever in this chat here. Appreciate it.
I'm here. Thanks, Chase. I'm unable to start video there for some reason. I might need other permissions. But I am so...
I'll work on it while you're talking.
We're learning on the fly here. So excited to be with you today, though. This has been in the workings for several weeks now. Chase and I have been kind of thinking about the best, I think the best way to teach unconventional influence, and influence, that's a term I came up with, but how to teach influence the way that special operations builds it into their troops, kind of the super soldier mindset, and how to build that into each one of you, the best way to do that. And so what we really want to do is for you to come away with some frameworks. I'm going to summarize and get into as much detail as I can in the next 20 minutes, but we're going to go through and give you some frameworks that hopefully you can use and implement today. And the whole idea is this. Part of the reason I joined the military when I was 35 years old, I had a whole life, like Chase said, in the music industry and in sales and marketing. And that's one of the reasons I joined PSYOP was, like, I already had a background in messaging. And I thought, man, how cool would that be if I could get kind of some of the training of, I had these dreams of how could I get some of the training of some of these Delta Force operators, these Rangers and Special Forces. How could I get that training and build it in a business? So I had the vision back when I was 35, when I joined the military, to go through some of the hardest training, put myself through the ringer, and bring it back to you. And that's what I hope. And since going through, like, that's been the lens through which I look at all of my training. Obviously, I've done some great stuff, being able to work and protect and serve my country, and that's been amazing, serve my family, and I love that. But the impetus and the reason that I even started the journey was to bring it back and add value to your lives. So I'm actually going to share my screen here. Okay. Make sure everyone can see that. So hoping you can see my screen. I'm assuming you can. Let me
Looks
know if you
good,
can.
Russ.
Okay, so we're going to go through unconventional influence. Covert behavior change. The reason I called it this, and we'll get into it, let me just go through this real quick. All of these have been used and are being used to protect countries and populations, but they can be used in a way that's not helpful, and they should not be used in a way to hurt others. Remember the golden rule, and that is treat others as you would like to be treated, right? So we're not responsible. Make sure you use these frameworks responsibly. My background, like Chase said, founder of Virtual G3, the narrative fusion cell, and this program of unconventional influence that you're getting. 19 years in the music industry, I learned to capture and keep people's attention and motion. Some of what you'll see when I go through this are the layers that I've kind of put together here, and that comes with my experience in music. That music is math and layers. And so you'll kind of see that in some of the planning. 8 years in client-facing revenue operations, and then 12 years in the military and special operations as a medic, PSYOP specialist, and now in signals and in language as a special operations team alpha linguist. So that is me and my compadres there in Bogota at the U.S. Embassy. That's really where a lot of the inspiration for this came from, for this unconventional influence, where we're going to talk about the self, team, and herd aspect of influence. So what we'll cover in UI, we're not going to cover all this today. Obviously, we've got about 20 minutes, but what we do cover in all of unconventional influence is self, team, and herd or target audience unconventional influence. We go through a few case studies. I'll mention them today. And then how you can change your messaging, your business messaging on the fly, how to analyze and counter propaganda, how to create belief chains, the whole influence continuum, turning current behaviors into desired objectives on a mass level. And then I do also, we won't do it today, but a workshop that is narrative fusion cell. So I am super lucky because I've been able to work with some of the most amazing people on the planet. One of those is Chase in my work in special operations. That's actually when I met him, I was getting ready to deploy to Colombia and I realized that we understood very well and were trained, millions of dollars went into our training. We understood how to message in mass, right, on a large scale. But what I didn't understand was the person-to-person behavior change and body language analysis and reading that Chase teaches like nobody else. And so I reached out to him. He connected with me, and that's kind of our history. But special operations forces, I've met some of the finest people, and they are volunteers. So just in and of itself, that's somebody who raises their hand and puts their lives in danger, in harm's way. They have been selected and they have been trained. And the thing I've found that ties them all together is that all of them have ingrained in their training and in who they are that their lives depend on the ability to do this at all levels, and that is unconventional influence. From the ground up, right, from the basement floor up, being able to become specialists at unconventional influence at the self level, at the team level, and then at the herd or target audience level. I say herd, that's an old term for kind of mass messaging. So we're going to go over the unconventional influence, the 3 levels, and kind of go over it here and then take some questions. So this is from one of my favorite magazines, site SoftRep, and unconventional influence comes from the term unconventional warfare, which when you think of that, you think so. You want to overthrow a foreign government? Well, this is where you start. And it is what you do within the jungles. You target and you work with native populations to be able to sometimes topple governments, bad, evil governments, sometimes just warring governments, but they use it as a way of working by, with, and through others, the native population, to be able to achieve mass effect. So unconventional warfare, again, is working by, with, and through others. It is an attempt to achieve victory indirectly through proxy force, through another military or paramilitary force. Unconventional contrasts with the big military or conventional warfare, and that forces are often covert or not well defined, and subversion and guerrilla warfare are relied upon in these circumstances. So this requires campaign level thinking, planning, and an indigenous approach is what we call it. So this is what the Soro pyramid, and it shows how we work from the ground up through covert effects and then finally to achieve overt actions within special operations, finding a dissatisfied group politically, economically, or otherwise, and being able to work by, with, and through them, train them, put them into different areas. So you obviously have to be good at the face-to-face. Your team has to be specially trained, and then you have to be able to scale this in mass. So why unconventional influence? Well, so there I was in Bogota, Colombia, working at the embassy. I was tasked to live with and work with the Colombian government, the Colombian army, in going through their Colombian PSYOP, their PSYOP program. It's a mix of PSYOP and civil affairs, in that they don't focus their efforts externally, internationally, outside the country. They focus it internally in rebuilding trust with their community. Because if some people think about this, about Colombia, some people think Narcos or some of those shows in Hollywood. But I was there in 2017. It was one of the most beautiful places you'll ever be, and some of the most beautiful people as well. It's not like that, but we kind of work with them as partners. And so they asked two of us, me and the captain there, to go through their course and audit it, and also go through as students and graduate. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure, but we worked with Colonel Caran there in doing that, and there was a bunch of articles written about it afterwards. I went through. These are some of my buddies there, and we all graduated together. But it was a lot of fun. But the things I learned were that campaign level planning are important in many ways. So I learned about these operations: the Operation Christmas, Rivers of Light, Bethlehem, and the campaign You Are My Child. And I suddenly realized that this was actually carried out by a Colombian marketing organization. They obviously had help from the military, but it was done by a marketing organization. So I thought, well, this is amazing. This is PSYOP for civilians, and it's to do good. It's to help people. So what the purpose of this was, to help FARC, the oldest living guerrilla force ever, 60 years old. It was to help to demobilize the FARC and bring them from murdering and drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, bring them from that all the way to demobilized and successful and peaceful citizens, now adding to society instead of taking away. So massive gap in like the behavior change that had to happen for a massive group. So not only for the FARC, but also for the people of Colombia that were hurt by this. And so both sides had to both demobilize and then accept them back in. And so it was just a massive campaign, and it was inspiring. And I saw the principles of planning, of pivoting and evolving a message, and how that can be used in business to great effect, to really serve your audience, to serve your customers better, to do good, right? To obey the golden rule. So there are 3 levels required, and the further you go up, the less force is required. If you've ever tried to change yourself, you know it's not an easy task. And so that's what I mean by force. To change yourself is the most difficult part of influence. You start with you first, right? And then you move. Once you become better, optimized, you let go of some of, like Chase says, some of the childhood traumas and the things that keep the mask on. Once you get rid of some of those things and are able to optimize your own thoughts and be present and be capable of carrying out missions, have that mission mindset, then you can join and be part of a team of others that have done that, where now the mission is, you become mission agnostic, and I'll get into that. But mission agnostic meaning it doesn't matter what the mission is, because you're all so highly optimized, you can all work together in a way that's fluid, that's flawless, and you're almost in that flow state together where you're able to achieve way more with a small, highly trained team, and then herd, or that TA, target audience, that UI at the mass level, where really now you're utilizing, you're thinking like a sociologist, like an archaeologist, like a psychologist, and you're bringing all these frameworks in to be able to analyze the target audience, be able to understand them better than they know themselves, build out their beliefs, instill new ones, and be able to plan a messaging campaign to take them from guerrilla warfare and internal terrorists to peaceful members of society. So let's talk about UI, unconventional influence at the self level. Let me see here. I'm going to stop sharing real quick so I can move this down. Back at it. Okay, UI self, where we learn to master complexity and space. So we learn to maximize complexity and space. Some of you will recognize this model. This is the neurologic levels by Robert Dilts. And he talks about there's these different levels. I won't get into it. You can look it up. But the idea is that there are these different levels or ways to achieve change, long-lasting change. And the further up you go, the more force you actually have to produce change. And so the focus here is that we're going to focus on change at the identity and belief level, which then opens up new capabilities or skills, new behaviors, and a new and optimized environment. So that's what UI self is about, is focusing in on that level of change for you. UI team, at the team level, now you, like I said, become mission agnostic. So we volunteer for special operations. We go through selection and assessment. Then we go through 18 to 24 months or more of specialized training, language training with a target language. And we go through, and during, this is called Team Week right here. And it takes the training and the selection and assessment takes a bunch of ragtag soldiers who don't know anything about teamwork and just have that drive, that don't quit attitude, and takes them and makes them into a highly tuned, highly optimized force like the ones on the right there. This is one of the early ODAs that went into Afghanistan and were super successful and be able to achieve mass effects with a small team. So take the left and turn it into the right, become mission agnostic. Doesn't matter what the mission is, you can achieve it. And then UI herd, or the target at the high mass level, where we learn to plan, target, pivot, evolve. So if you look at the bottom, I've taken that unconventional warfare pyramid and turned it into kind of one that we can use for business, where at the bottom we start with target client research, where we really begin to understand who our target client is, their story, their beliefs, their needs, their problems. And then we find a narrative angle. What I mean by that is a story. Stories have, since the beginning, since cavemen, stories, since language, in fact, stories have helped to convey a message in a way that just talking about it could never do, right? It lowers our defense mechanisms. It instills lessons without us even knowing that they're being instilled. And so you find that narrative angle, and then we iterate until we achieve the desired change, the overt change. And all of this happens at the covert level, the research, the angles, the iterations, as we work to get closer and closer to that resonant message that affects the change and brings them along the way. And so that's that process. So the keys to unconventional influence are really identity, reflection, and campaign level planning. Let me ask you, what do these have in common? I know our chat's been disabled, but other than the fact that they all look like triangles, right? What do these all have in common? And I'll tell you, they have reflection and identity in common. And that is, when we work at the identity or beliefs level, we are looking into the mirror of our own mind's eye to see who's looking back. We see what type of person we define ourselves out. For example, if you were to take your journal out and start writing a sentence and start with, I'm the type of person that, And if you've ever caught yourself throughout the day explaining to yourself to somebody else, I'm the type of person that, be careful, because you're about to give an identity statement. And that's what that is. And so a journal is a great way to understand and get down to really, who are you? Who do you see yourself as? If we have time, I'll get into a story. But that is the mirror of UI self. And then UI at the target audience level is we're showing others that mirror, helping them to either see a better or not as good version of themselves based on what we need to happen. And let me give you an example of that. With Colonel Karan, amazing leader in Colombia, we, like I said, I went through their whole program, and I had time to build a great relationship with him. We were good friends, and he trusted me and confided in me. And at the very end, he asked me, he said, Sergeant Robson, like, what did you think? Wasn't it a great the final exercise, the culminating exercise, wasn't it awesome? And the mayor was there, and it was just such an amazing result and experience. And I looked at him. I just took a second, and I said, Colonel Karan, it was fantastic. And I'll add this: it was fantastic if you want to be a party planner. And I just kind of let that sit. And I had a good relationship with him. I didn't mean to offend him, but I was showing him a version, a reflection of himself that I knew he didn't want to see, because I knew his core belief and one of his core objectives about himself was that he wanted Colombian PSYOP and his program to be seen as like a key part of the Colombian army, and he wanted it to be well respected. And so I knew it was all about being respected and for him. And so when I showed him a version of himself as a party planner, he didn't like that. And he bristled up, and he's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I provided some surveys to your personnel to be able to measure the effectiveness of that event where the mayor showed up, but they never used it. None of your cadre are teaching the importance of measures of effectiveness, being able to measure the effectiveness of your campaigns. And so if we're just throwing a party to throw a party, then we can be party planners. But if we want to be a military force that works to persuade, change, and influence the target audience, then we have to measure the effect of our campaign after the fact. And the light came on, and he got it. And so I took that negative reflection, I controlled it, showed him a version he didn't like, and then showed him the alternative of that image he didn't like, gave him a new alternative, and he ran with that. He assumed that new alternative and ran with it. And he didn't even remember that I did it. And that's awesome. When it's covert change, you don't need the credit, right? But he went to all the classes after and was just carrying the banner of measures of effectiveness and being able to measure effective change. And so that's what I mean by on the right there, where we show others the mirror of themselves, of either the good version or the bad version, and vice versa. We control the mirror. And that's what I want to build up to here. You control the mirror, you control the change. That's a note taker right there. Control the mirror, control the change. That's both for you, that's at the team level, and that's at the target audience or mass or herd level as well. You control the mirror, you control the change. And there's different tactics and techniques to do that but that's the strategy, to work from the bottom up, use unconventional influence and control the mirror. But it takes a lot of research. It takes that story to be able to lower their mechanisms, mechanisms of doubt and all that, and to be able to show them versions, positive or negative, to get the result and push them in the direction you need them to go to create that overt change.